I believe we have a quorum present for this hybrid meeting of the regular board meeting of the Chittenden Solid Waste District. It is November 17th, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is the agenda itself. I have one item to add to other business, and that is a request for an update on the Redmond drop-off center, where things stand. So there will be another business, should be brief, but that was requested to be added by Paul Stabler. Thank you. Are there any other additions or changes to the agenda as presented?
Look at them.
Seeing or hearing none, then the agenda will stand as presented. Are there any members of the public attending the meeting either in person or by phone who would like to address the board?
There are not.
Seeing and hearing none, we'll move on to item number 3, the consent agenda, which consists of 6 items. I want to pull out from the consent agenda the minutes of October 30th, 2021. That was our DOC retreat minutes. I'd like to pull that out for a brief discussion on that. But are there any other requests to pull something from the consent agenda? Seeing and hearing no requests, then the consent agenda, with the exception of the October 30th, 2021 meeting minutes, is approved as presented. Moving on to the October 30th, 2021 minutes of the district, which was our drop-off center retreat, I wanted to call the board's attention to one item on page 2 of the minutes, which is section number 3, mission beginning the journey. The very last sentence in that paragraph said, discussion was held on the interpretation of the charter and whether we do have a requirement to operate facilities. Sarah Reeves will confirm her understanding of the charter language and include this information in the next full board packet. It was just an unfortunate miss that information was not included in this board packet, but Sarah did research it, and I'd just like to get that in front of the board and into the record, what she found. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Sarah.
Thank you, and I do apologize for that. I did reach out to Thomas Maloney, who is on the line as well. Excuse me, just to be sure that I was also had the correct interpretation of that charter language that Commissioner Nolte had read out to the board. And Thomas, please feel free to jump in. And I do have email correspondence that I had intended to include in the packet, so I can make that available as well to the board. We can include that as kind of an addendum to the minutes. But in essence, Thomas did confirm that the interpretation that we've been operating under for these many years does say that while we have the authorization, the ability, the right to have facilities, to operate facilities, to cause them to be operated, to allow others to operate them, but does not require the district to be the operator. So there's not that's the difference between the shall and the may, essentially. So we are not specifically directed by our charter to operate any facility, but we do absolutely have the authority to do so if the district, if the board deems that to be a worthwhile endeavor. So I will include Thomas's description of that back to me, that answering of that question, like I said, as an slight amendment to the minutes for that day. Thomas, is there anything more detailed that you want to clarify for the board on that?
No, I think your analysis was, as you presented it in the email to me, was correct. That the district has the power, the authority under its charter to operate facilities, but not a requirement that it must. There are general Vermont laws that I did identify in my response that talks about, a town towns, municipalities in Vermont being responsible for the management of solid waste, and as part of that management, needs to provide either through participation in regional entities such as the solid waste district, to provide for facilities for whether it's recycling or landfilling or others, but it doesn't limit or require any one particular facility. So.
Thanks for that information and clarification. It was Leslie who brought this up at the meeting, and I don't see her present at the meeting. I did alert her that, Sarah, you would be presenting an update. I'll take it on myself to follow up with her with this information in the email string so that she's fully informed in case she doesn't see the minutes. I don't know if any other commissioners have a question or comment on this clarification. Hoping there are none, I think it's very clear. Since this was pulled out of the consent agenda, I believe we need to have official motion to accept these minutes. We're not changing the minutes. This is just a clarification, and there'll be additional information, as Sarah said, presented in the record. But if we could have a motion then to approve the minutes of the October 30, 2021 board retreat, that would be welcome.
So moved, Seth Burlington.
I'll second.
Thank you, Ron. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? There being none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? The minutes of October 30th are approved and accepted. Thank you. Item number 4, we'll move on to that. The FY23 preliminary budget. There is a requested board action. We are aware that we might lose our quorum by 6:30. Lee has to go off to another meeting, and he's a heavy hitter when it comes to votes. So I just want to just put that out in front of the board members. We would like to finish this item up by 6:30 so that we can vote on it. But with that said, Sarah,
Great,
please
thank
take
you.
it away.
So as you may recall or be understand and know, that our charter does require us to present a proposed budget for the next fiscal year by December 1. And the reason that we are charged as a district with developing our budget by that time is so that we can notify all of the members, the member communities within the district, if there's going to be any kind of a local assessment from the district to the cities and towns. And so that they can then incorporate that into their budgeting ahead of town meeting day, which is when most of our cities and towns approve their budgets for the next fiscal year. Generally, the practice has been that the staff prepares a preliminary budget. So this budget, with that express purpose of indicating whether or not there'll be an assessment. This budget that you see in your packet is a very best guess. I am confident that the budget will change. I am equally confident that there will not be an assessment needed to our cities and towns. So we can certainly communicate that message to our members, but with knowledge that the draft budget you will see in April and the Finance Committee we will be working on in February and March will look somewhat different than what you see now. The main reason for that is the CPI is so large this coming year that we really need to do a good dive into where it makes sense to apply that, where it doesn't make sense to apply that. We are always very precise and really dig into each line item, as the Finance Committee is well aware. So, but our past practice has been to apply the CPI to the current year's budget and issue that as the proposed budget. And I did not do that this year. That would have blown everything out of the water, and that was not necessary. So that is why I made reference to the large COLA that has been announced by the Social Security Administration, the CPI that through September, which is 5.23%, the CPI through October, I think was up around 5.75%. So I know that there will be some changes to the budget. However, we are very confident in the solid waste management fee estimate. That was done by Nancy and John using the model that we had commissioned last year. So we're very confident in those numbers. And many of the expenses are fairly good carryovers from year to year. They really don't change much. So I say that the budget will change. I don't anticipate it changing dramatically, but it will change. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Tim, you've got a question.
I'm just wondering what our requirement is. Does this require action? Are we approving the preliminary budget?
You are approving receipt of the preliminary budget, that you have seen the budget and acknowledged the, I'm guessing, and this is my interpretation and I'm open to other interpretations, acknowledging the general direction of the budget.
Got it. And I'm assuming, is it appropriate, and Paul, I'll direct this to you, for us to go ahead and raise some issues on early observations given what we've seen to date?
Following up on what Sarah said, that there's going to be a lot of work done on the budget in the Finance Committee. If you think your question, Tim, is helpful and germane at this early stage to the board to understanding the budget or its process, then I'd say go ahead. But if it's kind of getting into the some of the, I don't want to say the nitty gritty, but the more technical aspects of the budget, since those are going to be fully discussed both at the Finance Committee and then ultimately at the full board level, I'll trust your judgment as to what you want to ask, whether or not it's
Sure.
appropriate an hour later.
No, I appreciate that. Just a question. So Sarah, is the assumption is the solid waste management fee stays stable from consistent, no changes?
It's relatively the same, yeah.
And the tipping fee at the MRF is going to be the same?
So the tipping fee, I have readjusted our expectations downward from the actuals, upward slightly from the this year's budget. The tip fee will most likely, well, we're looking at lowering it slightly, and we are looking at increasing the ACR from the 22 budget up. So the 22 budget average commodity revenue, so the rate that we were budgeting the sale of recyclables, was at about $40 a ton. I'm budgeting that now at about $70 to $75 a ton. And looking at the tip fee, where we budgeted for this year at $80 a ton, bringing that down to about $65 to $70 a ton.
And so you're saying today, what's our tip fee at the MRF? 80?
Tip fee today is 80.
And where is Casella in Rutland?
They don't like to tell us that number. We have anecdotally heard that it's anywhere between $25 and $40 a ton.
Okay. So I guess, I mean, I just want to highlight to the board, and again, not to get into the nitty gritty, and we're looking at a P&L. We don't have the balance sheet and the cash flow statement, but I think directionally what we're saying is that if we look at the July 20 to June 21 numbers, we generated about a little over $3 million in free cash when you go to that net income line, because all the deductions after that are either non-cash or move into reserve accounts. And so we as a district are sitting in excess of $10 million in cash, I believe, right now.
This is, and I wish Nola were here, but she's happily home with her new baby. Again, that the amount in our bank accounts it's not free cash. It is not restricted, but it is assigned, and it has a purpose and where it's going. So as far as extra that is unassigned, and that's where we're looking at adjusting our reserves policy, which was in the board packet last month, but is needed to go back for a few tweaks to the Finance Committee to be able to move those unrestricted dollars that are into the other reserves, so that they again are assigned. So we don't have 10 million kind of floating around with no purpose. But we do have money in that sitting in the unassigned reserve. that we do need to reassign.
Tim, I was going to just, if you don't mind my jumping in, I thought what you were driving at is trying to identify somewhat the market competitive pressures that we have. One is we have the benefit of a higher than expected commodity revenues, but we're in a very tough competitive environment in terms of the tip fee, where we're at $80, and we're pretty confident that the private sector is charging significantly less than that. So I think what I'm hearing Sarah saying is we're going to adjust those to bring them more in line, but it might not affect the bottom line all that much.
That's right.
Well, I would argue we're not in a competitive environment. The fact that we've been able to sustain a 4x higher tipping fee means that it's totally inelastic demand. Okay, which would be consistent with the results that we've generated financially over the course through the pandemic, right? Demand stays consistent. People throw stuff away, regardless of what we charge, they throw it away. And the transportation fees would have to go ahead and skyrocket to go ahead and have it make sense for people to go ahead and ship stuff to Rutland. I guess the only point I wanted to, again, draw to the board's attention, I am going to be as a member of the finance committee, I'm going to advocate very strongly that we not only think about not generating any free cash, but actually returning cash in some way, shape, or form to our constituents. I think we have ballooned the amount of cash that we put into reserves over the course of the past several years. And I don't think it's appropriate at this point. We really driven into a bit of a cul-de-sac, because if we went ahead and if we cut our fees dramatically, I guess the one question I have in mind, do any of us feel confident that Casella and Myers and Gauthier would go ahead and reduce our constituents' costs for the consumers who are paying for pickup? And frankly, I don't think it would be passed through. And so I think we've really got a bit of a very interesting dilemma on our hands. So again, I'll get off my soapbox, but I think it would behoove all board members to really pay attention to this, because I think the fact that we've gone from where we were 7 years ago in our cash position to where we are right now is, I'd say a bit alarming. And frankly, I've been involved in the finance committee, and I'm disappointed that I didn't see the growth mushrooming over the course of the past few years.
Thanks for your comments, Tim. It's, you framed the process well. There'll be a lot to be discussed at the finance committee, and ultimately, again, bringing it back to the board. But again, as we pointed out, the resolution that we hopefully will be acting on in a minute says we resolve that the Board of Commissioners acknowledges receipt of a preliminary budget. The details to be worked out later. And one other point, Sarah, you may have mentioned it, but the timing here is also important to the benefit of the towns in the development of their budgets for town meeting in March. They need an early indicator of any impact that we might have on their budgets.
That's right. And that is the reason for the December 1st deadline that is in our charter.
Other questions and comments before we move to a motion and then have further comments and questions? Seeing none, I'd like to get this resolution on the table here, or move the resolution, and then we can have final discussion on it.
So moved.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. And just to be clear, the resolution states, be it resolved that the Board of Commissioners acknowledges the receipt of a preliminary budget to be further developed through the normal budget process. That's what we'll be voting on, the receipt of the budget. No details at this point. Any questions or discussions or points that any of the board would like to make on this motion? Seeing none, I believe we're ready for the question. Then all those in favor, since a lot of folks are muted, just raise your hand if you are in favor of this motion. Are there any opposed to the motion? I'll say that the motion passes. Leslie, you raised your raised hand. That was to vote in favor of it, not to pose a question.
Right.
Comment. Thank you. Just want to be clear. The motion passes. We are now ready to move on to item number 5, the Redmond Road Municipal Waterline Extension. This is an update. No action required, I believe, at this point. But I'll turn it over to either Sarah or Josh for bringing us up to speed, please.
Yes, Josh, if you could, excuse me, run us through what we have learned over the past couple of months and any of the, and then we want to take some questions and entertain some conversation. But if you could just briefly
Just to
run through
jump in, sorry, we're at page 29 of the board packet.
Thank you.
All right, hope everybody can hear me.
Yes.
All right, good evening, everybody. So I am bringing you the Redmond Road Municipal Waterline Extension. This is a cost estimate and update. Back in May of 2021 of this year, we presented our capital plan and update, and we'd indicated that we were going to investigate bringing a municipal water line down the road to our organics diversion facility or Green Mountain Compost. The extension is approximately 2,300 feet. It would allow for the ODF to not have to truck water anymore. We have an existing lagoon. The lagoon works great when there's water in it. When it gets really dry, it evaporates, which is exactly when we need water. So the idea was to investigate how to develop an operational water source that's more consistent. We've been kicking around extending this water line for at least a decade, as long as I've been here. So we went forward, we awarded Du Bois and King the project development. They came back to us with a plan moving forward. We've discussed this plan with the town of Williston to make sure there weren't any significant hurdles in the way. It's gotten to a point now where they gave us an engineer's estimate. The reason I'm bringing this update to you is that the engineer's estimate was about double what we anticipated. It is required to build the water line in Williston with ductile iron. The cost of construction has gone up. And so I just wanted to get everybody's, eyes on this. This water line will initially provide an operational benefit to the organics diversion facility. The water needs at the facility are relatively weather dependent. But based on last year and the year before, we're going to needing more water as opposed to less because storms are coming in more intense. So preliminary estimates, we might need up to a third of the production requirement to be trucked in. Trucking water in is about 10 times more expensive than actually getting water from a water line. So with all of that said, we asked Du Bois and King to generate a cost estimate. Their estimate came back at about $823,000. We had budgeted $455,000. We then asked them to take a look at what it would cost to install a production well and then meet the required production storage amount. And because we're looking at the future of the district and siting and facilities down Redmond Road, one of the parts of the water line extension also provided the benefit that it could add water to the potential new construction of a MRF and the potential new construction of an administrative building. So when we asked them to look at the production well installation, it would also have been, the numbers that they came back with would be to install a well at the ODF, at the potential administrative building, and at the potential new MRF. And that cost estimated came back at 1.5 million roughly. We kind of dug into the details on that, and we asked them to provide us kind of a risk analysis on the difference between the two. It is their recommendation based on the assessment that they've done for us to move forward with the water line, which is what I wanted to bring to this group. I think, with the blessing, or at least, a head nod, I would like to get some construction document or some construction details out and bid this project. Because of its price, it will come back and we'll have to get approval from the board. But in conversation with the Champlain Water District, ductile iron is a little more difficult to come by. So if we bid it sooner than later, I would like to have something out maybe by the early part of December. I would bring either back in December or January an approval for this project, and then we're roughly 6 to 12 weeks out based on supply chain requirements for ductile iron. So that would put us in the spring, which is when we want to construct this project. So that's kind of the 40,000 foot overview of this update.
Thank you again. Josh, you're just trying to get this in front of the board that the costs are different from what we had originally
Yes.
been expecting.
Correct. And you'll see that in the next discussion we have. But yeah, that's really kind of to get a litmus test on moving forward with this.
Paul Stable had his hand up, and then I see Ron, you have your hand up.
Josh, what's your best guess at payback period given the operational savings?
Operational savings, the payback. Well, the Waterline, if we go based on Waterline, those are good between 25 and 50 years. Payback back of the envelope, which Sarah and I discussed, is probably 18 years, based on operational needs. But there's also less risk. If we need to generate more water. Our new process does require more water. It creates a great product, and our finishing is quicker, and our operations are more efficient, but it just requires more water. So with that, there's also the uncertainty of if we put a production well in, there's no guarantee we get the water we need. So that's another kind of risk that I've always kind of had in my back pocket of, that's a concern. But yeah, back of the envelope, long answer to a short question. About 18 years is our estimate.
Ron, if you don't mind, we know that Lee has to drop off, and he's got his hand raised. If you don't mind, Ron, I'd just like to recognize Lee.
Yeah, go ahead.
Before you have to drop off.
Thanks, Ron. Yeah, Josh, one of my thoughts was originally with this water line, was there an expense that was going to be shared with the depackaging facility that was going to be installed?
There was a portion, the depackaging facility was going to consider putting a production well in themselves to the tune of about $150,000. If we brought municipal water down, they would have provided the $150,000 to support the water line.
Okay.
So that played into our original cost estimate, but that didn't pan out.
Yeah, obviously. It's too bad. And obviously I know plastics and resins are crazy to get. There's not much of a supply for those right now. I was just wondering if maybe they gave a cost estimate using plastic rather than ductile iron, or they just
Town won't let us build.
Feasible. Oh, really?
Yeah, their standard and requirements are that we use ductile iron, and they won't approve the project unless we don't.
Gotcha.
So that was a question we had as one of the assessments. And to Paul's question on that return on investment, also that's just considering the ODF. That's not considering the admin building and the MRF if we choose to move forward with those.
So that means, Josh, that the payback, were we to pursue those projects, the time frame would shorten. Is that what the implication is? Okay.
Yes.
I want to be clear.
I think that around 10 years. It is a pretty significant capital investment, but there's also operational costs that are involved with putting production wells in. We'd have to have a licensed water operator managing those systems. So that's something that we wouldn't have because Champlain Water District manages, the water that comes through.
Thank you. Lee, any other comments or questions before you have to leave?
No, I'm good. Thank you. And thank you, Ron, for letting me ask my question.
Yeah, that's fine. I actually think you stole my question. On the issue of ductile water lines, I'm presuming that it's a best choice based on its ability to withstand the years in the ground that we would hope it would last.
It's 100% 50-50, really. Some towns live and die by, HD, high density plastics, and some towns live and die by ductile iron. I think it actually plays into the entire Williston system is ductile iron. So the Williston water crew knows how to manage and maintain ductile iron. So I think if they had different systems, that would cause a problem. That's my best guess. But, certain towns in Chittenden County don't use ductile iron. But that is the requirement in Williston. And both materials have a 25 to 50 year life expectancy. So it just depends. But I've asked actually two different consultant engineers that, what's what. And they said it just depends on who you're talking to.
Paul, I see your hand raised, but Kelton had posted a chat comment question. Kelton, do you feel
it was already answered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Paul Stabler.
Just was wondering, I believe, Josh, that Waterline would run along the same side of the road that the Vermont gas line that was installed a while back. Is that going to be particularly problematic, and was that addressed by the consultants?
That was addressed by the consultants, in the town will be putting the water line in the right of way of the town, and the right of way takes precedent over where the gas line is put in. We will have to cross under the gas line once for sure to get into our new approach for the ODF, and that will be a conversation with Vermont Gas. We've actually engaged with them, and our construction plans take into account that we're going to go lower than we need to, and it has to be open trenching to do that. But we're staying on the side of the road that's closest to any facility that we've built. So we worked with the town on that as well, and they didn't like the idea of us crossing the road, and it's more expensive to do that. So we decided to stay, on the side that all our facilities will be on.
Other questions or comments on the Waterline extension? Ron?
Yeah, on the question of installation, is it going to be open trench for the entire distance, or can some of it be put by underground drilling?
It'll be open trench then, because we're threading the needle between the Vermont gas pipeline and the road, the actual road. But there's about an 18-foot distance between the two. So we've got a good width that we feel confident we'll get in, and it won't mess with either. But yeah, it'll have to be open trenching, because we're going to be basing our line on proximity to the Vermont gas line. To be honest, we don't want to get any closer than we have to. And those GPS coordinates are accurate but not perfect. So I wouldn't want to underground drill any direct bore anything. I think we're going to move real slow and not hit a gas line.
I'm seeing no other comments at this point. Just to kind of wrap this up again, board's not being asked to approve anything right now or vote on it, but this is being brought to our attention, so that staff understands that the board will allow them to continue down this road. Again, we'll have the chance to say yes or no to it ultimately, but I think staff would be helpful if the staff heard from the board members any deep concerns about following this path. I'm not hearing any. There are lots of good questions, and there'll probably be more hard questions about costs coming up, but I'm just trying to represent for the whole board that staff can understand that the request or intent to continue down this road is okay. And with that, then I think we'll ask you to come back to us in the future with hard numbers and a decision, but I think we're ready then to move on to item number 6, the capital projects update, which begins on page 36 of your meeting packet.
Yes, thank you. This is also part of the Josh Tyler Show. So this is a capital review, initially of fiscal 21. We like to kind of give a short wrap up of the major projects that we did in the previous fiscal year, and then some highlights of in the fiscal 22 updates of what we've done so far this year, and then just a reminder of kind of where the 5-year capital plan sits, and any changes that we're seeing at this point to the early years in the 5-year plan. So the 5-year plan that is attached in this packet is the same, basically the same list that was in the budget for last year. So that hasn't changed. We've adjusted some of the numbers within that. So Josh, if you could do a run through of the memo again, it's the first section is that the end of the last fiscal year overview, and then where we are today.
No problem. Yeah, we are in the middle of some pretty capital intensive years. We're updating and upgrading a lot of our facilities that are relatively old. So I'm just walked you through the major milestones from 2021. We completed our ODF, Organics Diversion Facility Phase 1. We had estimated it was going to cost $1 million. It came in about 50,000 less than we had, or 42,000 less than we had anticipated, which is great. We also got a full sales season under our belt, and the ODF over the last 2 years actually has not required a subsidy and actually has made revenue, which is great. And that's a direct result of the investment that we made and the operational changes that we shifted to. And we look forward. We've got one more big push for the ODF, but that's going to put us in a really good position moving forward. So we were excited that everything worked out that way. If there's any questions on the ODF expansion program project, let me know.
What's the
Okay.
big push? You said one last big push?
One last, we're going to change. So our scale, last month, we had an approval of a new scale. That also is going to come along. We're proposing, what you'll see in the budget in the appendix, or that I have here in the plan. We're going to, our approach is going to change. We're going to bring in a new approach to allow for the new scale, because we want 70 feet in each direction. And by doing that, we're going to actually clear out the working yard so that we can bring wood waste into the ODF, which we currently stockpile or aggregate down in Williston. So the thought is to reduce traffic at the Williston drop-off center, free up some extra space for some potential different material management, shift that up to the ODF, and start collecting wood up there, which is its ultimate its ultimate destination anyway. So it cuts down on transportation as well. So that's kind of how the whole layout will work. And the new approach provides a better line of sight for entering into the facility as well, with the larger trucks. This was part of our depackaging layout, but it was something we needed to do regardless if they showed up or not. So we're following through with it because it's going to help us, with a lot of throughput issues. So that's really the next big one. And I'll kind of lay out those numbers when we get to the end of this particular talk. All right, drop-off centers. We had a lot of capital on drop-off centers, but we also just had a retreat, and we're kind of bringing it in because we realized, let's take a holistic view of the entire system. So really, we had some maintenance and upkeep and some innovation, in my personal opinion. We spent some money at the Essex drop-off center. We added a compactor. And if anybody's been to the Essex drop-off center lately, that extra compactor does a couple things. We built it so you can access it on 3 sides, which increases people coming there, their throughput. More than one person can stand there and use it. When one fills up, we don't have to immediately move it. We can open the other one up. So it also then decreased the requirement for us to have like overflow open tops, which don't compact. So that actually increased our efficiencies for hauling. So we're driving more compacted material. We're making less trips. So we were really excited about that. The innovation for getting to the compactor on 3 sides actually came from our maintenance and roll-off crew. They did a great job. They built it in, and we're planning on doing the exact same thing at South Burlington to really help the throughput there. So that was that big project, and it was a good one. We've received some really good feedback from our public. Moving on, environmental depot.
Hang on, Josh.
Oh, sorry.
Leslie has a question.
Yeah, I have a process question here. I appreciate all the information, but the capital budgeting, I thought, normally gets discussed in the finance committee, and we haven't done that. And the other thing that I'm seeing is that we're looking at the expenditures divorced from the financing or payment thereof. And to me, this is just in such a vacuum. I mean, it's good information. I appreciate it, but I'm not sure that we're using the right process. Just a footnote that we can think about. We don't have to discuss it now. I'd like to take this up in the finance committee. I'm just sharing my concern with the board. That's all.
No, thank you, Leslie. I just want to be clear that what Josh is talking about now are projects that were completed in the last fiscal year. So we have been asked by previous boards to provide an end of the fiscal year wrap up of our capital projects, and then to come to the board on a quarterly basis with updates on current year capital projects. So that's what this is. This is the wrap up from last fiscal year and then the year to date on current projects. So this is not projecting future
I was
projects.
looking at the 5-year, yeah, but you've included the 5-year capital plan, and that's sort of what perhaps confused me.
Okay, yeah, that was just for context. So yes, you're right. As far as when we get down to that point, I agree. You know that the finance committee has traditionally taken that up first, and that is still the intent. And we were including that so that the board and the public could see kind of where the current year projects are sitting, and then what had been presented as part of the budget this past year. So it is definitely not the intent of either Josh or me to go through any of the out year projects. That is simply informational and certainly up for discussion and debate at another time and in another
Okay,
process.
thanks.
And
Sorry,
I'd add that-
sorry for the interruption, but I was just getting a little confused.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the opportunity to clarify. Thank you, Leslie.
And I think this is a benefit to board members who are not deep into the numbers, really giving us an overall sense, I believe, of how we're doing. It kind of goes back perhaps to Tim's comment earlier that in the next budget, you know, where he's coming from. It's helpful, I think, for the board to have kind of a broad background of knowledge and a sense of what we're doing, what we're about before we get deep in the details. But it's still beneficial, at least to me it is.
Hey, Josh, I
Thank
think
you.
we're heading into the environmental depot.
Environmental depot, we replaced the roof. But that was a big one because we've been wanting to replace it for about 8 years. So we finally did it, but I wanted to point that out. The MRF had a,
Oh, one moment, Josh, Tim,
Is that a leased facility?
the depot?
yes.
Environmental
it is
depot.
SDs on this as well. Josh, speak up if I'm wrong, but it is a leased facility.
No,
We own the
own-
building.
we own the building. We lease the land from the city of South Burlington.
The other way around. Okay, good. Thank you.
All right, moving through this. This one's pretty menial. The MRF needed a loader. We got approval to purchase it in FY21. It didn't show up till FY22, so you'll see that. That's just a footnote when I show you the next couple tables, or when I walk through the next couple tables. So really, to come down to it, in FY21, we proposed $1.7 million. We actually spent 1.2. When I say program input, the MRF contributed $256,500. So the amount that we actually paid out in FY21 was $965,000. To date, which was presented last month, our capital reserve has $3.7 million in it. I'll walk you into kind of the update on what was already approved for FY22 capital.
Josh, can I interrupt? Would it be possible to share your screen?
Oh, absolutely.
That would be helpful.
Screen two. All right. Let me know. Oh, I have to push the share button. Okay. How's that?
That is, we've got a couple of hands raised before we get into this. Tim took his hand down. Leslie?
Yeah, in your description of the ODF work, you mentioned a grant, but I don't see how that appears in the table. That's where I think I'm getting confused about the financing part of things.
And Josh, we're seeing a blue screen now. We're not
And I
seeing.
can't see
Oh,
the-
sorry. Right. It was screen two. Thank you, Sarah. I didn't mean to. So, okay, Leslie, great question. Let me explain that. So in this table here under ODF, the $1,041,500, that included that grant, that $500,000 grant. It was a 60-40 match. What we wound up spending, including the funding from the grant, was $999,727. Does that help?
Sorry, I'm not, when you say including the grant, meaning our own funds were 999 and there was a $500,000 grant on top of that?
Correct.
Okay. So the cost, all right, a little bit backwards to me.
So the project costs all in were just shy of 1.5 million.
Right. And honestly, to me, that's how it should be shown. That the total project cost is 1.5, of which 500,000 came from a grant and the balance came from our funds.
Okay.
This is not the right way to present that, in my opinion.
Understood. I think we were looking at it from a cash out perspective, but I totally understand your perspective from the actual cost of the projects.
Right. So for example, we're talking about a pretty expensive waterline extension. Maybe there'll be grants available for that. You've got a cost estimate now. Now it's time to go see what kind of financing can we get for that. So that's the way I think it should be presented going forward.
It makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah,
No matter,
take that note.
whether or not that grant money, I'm looking at the ODF of $1,041,000 and the actual of 999, whether or not you included or excluded the $500,000 in grants, the difference would still be the same, 41,773. So if we, perhaps even though the presentation might not work for everybody, we can still stay focused on that item, that line, for an overall understanding of how the capital spending went for fiscal year 21, and I would presume shortly we'll hear about fiscal year 22.
Correct. So again, just to bring you back to this line, the proposed capital expense was 1.7 million. We spent 1.2. We had program input from the MRF that was to cover the capital costs of the MRF of 256,500, which got us to the amount of money that came out of our capital reserve, which was $965,287. To date, that was brought up last board meeting. We have $3.7 million in our capital reserve currently. The approved budget, I'm just going to jump down here. The approved FY22 proposed, or I shouldn't say proposed, approved capital budget was $3.2 million. Program input was coming from the MRF again at $450,000. The amount that would come out of our capital reserve at the end of the day, or at the end of the fiscal year, would have been 2.799 million. There has been some adjustments. We had to move the MRF loader into FY22 because that's when we received it. So that's when it hit the books. This $368,000, this is taking into account the extra cost of the water line. That's what that is right there. Roll off and maintenance will not see a couple rolling stock come in this fiscal year, which is why we see a reduction in spending. And again, our DOCs, we had anticipated upgrading the Richmond drop-off center significantly, and that will not take place in FY22, this current year. So that was the big difference there. Also, based on our drop-off center retreat, we were going to do some significant upgrades at Milton, but we're holding off on that for kind of a consensus on what we're going to do moving forward based on what we're talking about in that retreat. So those are the big ones. So really the estimated capital, again, is 3.2. Same program input for the MRF. Our estimated capital is relatively the same. It's about $3,000 difference. But I just wanted to point that out to the board.
So, Paul, you were focusing on the 41,000 we saved, but if you look at this table, it's been done in reverse. So, guys, we got to be consistent. Here, you've got negatives for where the actual cost is higher. So, I'm really having trouble with the presentation here. We need consistency. And the other thing I would like to again stress, which I've done before, is the proper way to do this is to have a table called sources and uses of funds. So you list all your uses and you total them, and then you list all your sources of funding for those uses and you total that. This is not the right way to do this kind of work. I hope this is not the first time I've had to raise this, but we really need some consistency and clarity on these kinds of presentations. It's fine that you've walked us through. I'm sure everybody understands it, but really we can do better.
Tim, you have your hand raised.
I do. I have a question. I noticed in the estimate for fiscal 22, we've got 249,000 allocated for the new MRF. How much of that has been spent?
None of it currently.
Correct. None of it to date. That was
Yep,
for
none.
consulting fees. So none of that has been spent yet.
And then there's, I believe, 55,000 in the admin section for a new admin building. Are we in the same situation? None of that's been spent either.
We did contract that, and we're working with Lamro and Dickinson right now to develop site work, civil work, and permitting to see what that would cost and if we can actually do it.
Okay. I guess I'm not sure if I missed one of the meetings or not, but I'm not sure exactly where we stand on building a new admin building and whether or not clearly we need to spend money to determine whether or not we need to spend a little bit of money to determine whether or not it makes sense to spend a lot of money to make a capital investment. And if that's where we are on the new admin building, then, I support that as one of the options. I'm assuming that, but obviously we haven't approved the new admin building. Conversely, when it comes to the MRF, I'm a little bit concerned. We as a board approved pushing forward and spending money to go ahead and scope the project. There was a caveat there. I know I think I stated it pretty clearly, and it wasn't either implicit in the motion, that the expectation was that we were going to go ahead and review alternatives. We have not reviewed any alternatives to the new MRF. At $249,000 is a lot of money. Where do we stand with respect to the alternatives? I'd heard a rumor that we were going to go ahead and outsource the analysis of different options, but I haven't heard anything about that.
Yeah, it was not subject to rumor, but yes, that was what we ended up doing. We are bringing those alternatives to the board next month.
Right, and are we doing that analysis internally, or did we contract for an outside firm to go ahead and do that?
No, we contracted with an outside firm with SCS Engineering.
Okay. Would it be possible to go ahead and get the RFP and any details on that analysis to date?
Well, there was no RFP because it did not rise above the level of needing to be competitively bid. They're able to do the work under that threshold, so we did not need to go out to bid for that service. And they have done this kind of analysis for us in the past, and we're comfortable and confident in their capabilities to perform the work.
I wanted
What are
to.
how many alternatives are they going to propose? And did we tell them what the alternatives were, or did they develop the alternatives?
No, we developed the scope of services for them and with them. And the first alternative they're looking at is the do nothing, to your point, Tim. You want us to take a look at, what is the do nothing option. So that's the first one that they're looking at. And then the next is, to look at retrofitting the existing facility. And then it's a couple or two or three more, we're still finalizing that, alternatives for greenfield alternative.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
I wanted to jump in and offer my recollection, Tim, to your question about the admin building. My recollection, and please, Sarah or others, correct me if I'm wrong. This has been under discussion for at least a year. I believe it was at one of the finance committee meetings last year when some initial numbers came in about building versus leasing, and directed staff to go out and take a look at what leasing costs would be like in Chittenden County, understanding there's a lot of office space that had been built. I know I saw some numbers, and I believe they were presented to the finance committee. I could be wrong, but those numbers were very unattractive. And I believe Sarah and staff had indicated that it would be better to move down the road of pursuing construction. And my understanding, that's still in process. That evaluation is still underway with no action yet. No presentation to the board, no action yet by the board.
That's right. And we did present that alternative, whether it was rent, lease, build, certainly to the finance committee. And I'm not recalling if we presented to the full board or the executive board, but it absolutely went to the finance committee. And again, the process, we want to be sure we're doing things right. So to Josh's point, the small amount of money was spent to do the civil site assessment, just to make sure that, again, our assessment of the available property on Redmond Rd, that we had the right spot and that it could be done. So again, it was a small amount, for the engineers to confirm that. And now we're on to the next phase of confirming with our staff who would be mainly utilizing the building, what the needs are, and bringing that now to the next phase, which is, again, getting some initial design and initial construction costs. So we're not anywhere near yet bringing a construction contract to the board. So we're still in a somewhat preliminary phase, but it moved a little bit further along.
And there's a lot of good value in having this discussion right now. Again, to remind the board that this is something that has been under discussion. We'll be coming back to the board. So just being aware of it, so that when it does come, you'll have that background and history, knowing that this was in the pipeline and coming up to being presented. I think there's the current office, I'm just speaking for myself, is totally inadequate. If you've had a meeting there, it's not an adequate facility. Something needs to be done. What the answer is, that's up to the board. Leslie.
I'd be curious as to what proportion of the admin staff are still working remotely.
So I was in the office yesterday, and we had nearly a full office. So it does vary. We have two of our employees who had elected to, and then three actually, 2 to 3 who have elected to work from home pretty much all the time. And the rest have a staggered schedule based on their needs. But I'd say on any given day, Josh, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but on any given day, there's at least 10 to 12 people in the office. Like I said, yesterday, we were nearly full.
Okay, thank you.
Michelle, you had your hand up and then it came down, I think.
Thank you, Paul. I just wanted to offer that I am currently working predominantly from home, primarily because of the crowded situation at the admin office, as is virtually all of my staff, and also other inadequacies of the current admin building.
Thank you, Michelle. Ron, your hand is up. You're muted. There you go.
Yeah, I think that looking forward, there are maybe a couple of questions that could be revisited about leasing opportunities. As I look around the area, I do see quite a bit of commercial space that is vacant. And if that is an indication of a glut on the market, it might be the case that owners of that commercial space would be very amenable to discussions about better leasing costs. So I think we shouldn't probably turn our back on the idea of leasing and maybe just investigate again a little bit more closely.
We did do a very rigorous and thorough investigation. We talked with several property managers, had at least 2 draw up some fit ups for us, some design specs essentially for the commercial space. And so, again, I think we could continue to look and see if there are other options out there, but I don't think that we would get what we exactly need. And that was what we found for the price. It was still extremely, and Tim was saying, we got the nicest raised ranch on Redmond Road. I don't deny that. Even though I might have a little quibble, as I spent some of yesterday cleaning some mouse droppings out of my desk drawer, but we did do a very extensive and exhaustive look throughout Chittenden County, and we admittedly did focus much of the attention on the central part of the county. That is where quite a lot of the available space was located. And it is, again, it's central to all of our facilities. If we're looking at kind of a hub and spoke model for wanting to be near as an admin, administrative function near the different facilities. And there wasn't as much space as you would think that there should be vacant. So at least not the amount of space that we needed or could be retrofitted affordably. So again, we can send out that we can include that memo that was presented in the next packet, if you like, for some information. And we can take another look at it, Josh and Amy and I and Tim, and see if anything has changed. I think we would still land on the same conclusion.
Tim.
No, I certainly can't speak for the board, but I don't think that there are too many people who would disagree that we need a plan B, right? It's time to move out of our current digs, and whether or not we lease or we build on our own, that's the economic analysis that we've got to go through. And obviously, since we're land rich and land is really pricey, so yeah, and I think we're moving in the right direction.
I would only offer the comment, concern that I think the nature of work in office buildings is changing, and we just have to be very careful that we don't lock ourselves into an outdated configuration. I wouldn't advocate going back to the old, partitions and in a bullpen sort of setup, but we need to keep our minds open that the office of the future may not look like anything we've ever seen before.
Agreed.
Totally, definitely agreed. And the same process that I kind of approached the Waterline, bringing you the engineer's estimate, will be the same approach we bring with the admin building. We will have the site civil development costs, the standard construction costs, and then the building erection costs that we'll bring to you based on the professionals we work with. And then we'll have to go to bid, at that point, if we choose to move forward. Moving forward on this, we jumped right into this 5-year plan. So for not wanting to go line by line through this, you guys actually have touched on a couple of the larger things. One of the things that Paul had asked is phase 2 is what we're calling it. That's the ODF construction project. And the only number that's changed in this from the approved budget was this 823,000. I had 455,000. And again, we'd assumed 150,000 in-kind addition from a potential partner. So that's what we're talking about. The scale itself for 150,000 has been approved, but we still need to go to construction bid to bring that back to the board for approval. If anybody has anything that jumps out of them, please let me know. The admin building is here at the bottom. I'll scroll down to it. is here. So we have 55,000 for site design and permitting. We've currently used about half of that to do civil site assessment to make sure that we can put the facilities and meet our permitting requirements. We're moving forward with that. There's about 2 more weeks of assessment before we move into the architectural phase. And that will be the rest of the amount that we allotted for this. We do assume, or we have assessed on a larger scale, that 1.75 million will be the cost requirement for the new admin building. It started out at 1.5, but construction prices have increased. But again, that will be refined once we get our engineer's cost estimate, and then again once we get the bid results back, if we choose to move forward.
Josh, I have a question. Roughly the square footage. I don't know much, a little bit about construction. I know residential, you know, what a 2,000 square foot home is, a 400,000 or 4,000 square foot home. What kind of square footage has been under discussion?
So the site civil said, can we put a 10,000 square foot building in this space? And the answer is yes. Will it have the amenities? Will it be able to treat stormwater? Will that property provide stormwater treatment? Will we have adequate septic space? Will we have adequate parking? And the answer in the civil site development is yes, we will. Do we need 10,000 square feet? I am not convinced we do. The next step is to do a fit up estimate, an assessment, and work with an architect. My guess is we'll wind up around 7,500 to 8,000, give or take. And that will probably be dependent on if we go with a conference room and what size it'll be. Because it would be nice to have our own conference room, but if that's a deal breaker, you know, we'll assess that.
Thank you, Tim. Your hand has been up. I don't know if that's just a holdover or you have a new question. You're muted.
It's a holdover.
Thank you. Leslie, your hand.
Yeah, it would seem to me that the question of the right square footage would also depend on sort of conceptual thinking about the organization and use of office under new circumstances. So, it's not clear how that kind of thinking is being fed into this. I think when and if you bring something to the board, and it should be, I think, in a preliminary manner, there should be some discussion or explanation about your thinking, as Paul Roos said, about new ways of working, because to simply go forward with a design based on, obsolete design principles or working principles would be a big mistake. So we'd want to hear, I certainly, as a board member, I'd want to hear a conversation about your deliberations and the advice you get from professionals on that.
Well, we have had some of those conversations, and again, I apologize if it has been which committee was at, whether it's finance or exec board or the full board, but we certainly have had these conversations, because I know Paul has brought this up in previous meetings, and Leslie, you had made comments about energy efficiency and making sure that we are looking to get the greatest bang for our buck as far as energy efficiency as possible, whether that is looking into different options for that, whether it's solar, or you had mentioned geothermal. And so certainly, we've had some of these conversations a while ago, and they were a while ago. So we're certainly not looking at replicating any old system. And if we've learned anything from COVID, it is that we do need to be very flexible in our working environments and our working arrangements for our staff in order to be able to recruit and retain high quality staff. And to Paul's point, we don't know what the future will hold and how the next generation of employees may prefer to work, want to work best. So we're looking at different ways to make sure that the working environment can be as flexible for the future as possible. And there are multiple ways to do that. And that does get in clearly into the design. But so it's not just the internal workings, but it's also how does the building function and how do we want it to function for the very long term and long future, and how can we make sure that it is as sustainable as possible. A critical component to how flexible, internally flexible, say the walls can be, if you want to get into a movable wall system, it really does play into the HVAC. And again, the big COVID lesson is air exchange and airflow, and the health, the internal health of the building for its occupants. So we are absolutely having those conversations as staff. When we go to get some architectural assistance and design assistance, that will be a focus. Will be create for us a very healthy environment, internally and externally. So yes, we are not looking at a cubicle farm. We have heard that loud and clear from all of the staff who will be working in the building. Please, no cubicle farm. And we are, again, getting input from them on how do you like to work best, and also asking the question, given the fact that so many of us have been working from home, how likely is it, do you think you will be in the building? Will you be maintaining a work from home schedule? If you do want to work in the office, how many days per week do you anticipate being there? How many days per week do you anticipate needing to meet in person? So we're asking all of these questions of our current staff, because that's really all we can ask. We can't ask the future staff.
Sure. And that sounds, that sounds great. If you and none of the people working on this project have done so, I would urge you to make a trip to Green Mountain Power's facility in Colchester and have a look at the work stations and organization of that facility. It's really impressive and was way ahead of its time. It must be 15, 20 years old by now, but please have somebody make a little field trip.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yep.
We've kind of zeroed in on the admin building, just staying with that for a second. Other board members who haven't spoken up, sometimes those of us who are a little bit more familiar with it kind of dominate the discussion, but I don't want to miss the opportunity for other board members. If you have a concern, question, or comment on the admin building, since we've been talking about that for the last 15 minutes. I'm hearing none, which is fine. Josh, are you pretty much done with your presentation then on the capital budget? We pretty much zeroed in on the admin building, and it's great to get that out on the table, build our awareness.
Yeah, the end was the two biggest projects are going to be that the cost for the new approach at ODF, which will be the spring, and the admin building, which is budgeted for FY23. Those are the big kind of take homes that everybody focused on. So thanks for asking those questions.
And again, point out, as Tim pointed out, the MRF is not on this. That's a bond project most likely, and not being funded totally by the capital reserves, which is a big explanation for why we don't see that in this schedule. But clearly that's something will be coming up for intense discussion, or deep discussion too. Any other discussion then on the capital capital projects update? Seeing none, moving on to item 7, there is no reason to have an executive session tonight. Just confirming that. We can move on to item 8, other business. And as I already identified, if Sarah could update us on the status of the Richmond Drop-Off Center.
Right. So I'll bring Josh in there as well. So the status is that we had been working with the town to coordinate the decommissioning of the site. And we had prepared a list of items that we were felt that we could potentially sell to the town as assets that we did not need to redeploy. So the town authorized Casella, their future vendor, to talk with us about those assets and what they may be interested in, what they were not interested in. And the last conversation was several weeks ago. So I asked Josh to reconnect with the town and just ask for a status update. Josh, if you could fill in some of those blanks.
Yeah, currently we've negotiated with Casella's representatives, and they are not comfortable with pricing on 2 of our assets that we're going to leave in place. And we said, okay, speak with the town. They're the one brokering the deal. Let them know your concerns, and we're waiting to hear back from the town. But as it stands now, we will be taking the booth, one of the compactors, all of the roll-off boxes, and all of the blocks on the site. The rest of the infrastructure will stay on site. And we're still.
That's presuming that Casella does not want to purchase those assets. If they do purchase assets, if they do not want to purchase the assets, which basically we're talking about the asphalt, and so we would need in the concrete, and we would need to remove that. So that's really what we're waiting for. So there was a question of, well, how much is it going to cost to decommission the site? And that's the big ticket item, right? We have to tear that up and bring it back down to dirt, which is how we were presented with the site. And that's the agreement that we have with all of our community, our DOCs, our host communities, is that if we are to leave the location and decommission the operation, that we will return the property to the condition in which we found it, which is basically dirt. So that's the one, and it is big. It's a big ticket item, but it's also a significant asset to the location. It does need some work. That was, as Josh mentioned, we were planning on doing some regrading and repaving of the site, so it does need some work. Casella had talked a little bit about maybe they would just resurface. That's fine. But the underlayment that is there right now has a lot of value, particularly in the winter. It's pretty difficult, much more difficult to have to try to pave anything in the wintertime, and generally in Vermont, as you know, you can't. So it would present some difficulty, but Casella has indicated that they're prepared to manage that situation if they decide not to buy that asset from us. So we're just waiting to hear from the town what the direction is. We are scheduled to continue to staff and serve the Richmond community through December 30th. That's our last day of operation there, according to the standard schedule that we have. So we would take the next several weeks of January, and the town is aware of this, to remove the items that we're going to remove.
Paul Stabler, did that answer the questions that you had?
Yes, it does. I would ask that we again get an update in December when you know more. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Tim, your hand is up.
Have we taken any steps to see if we can make sure that we have access to the data for the facility? Obviously, we're going to have we're going to have one less drop-off center, but I'm just wondering, should we be offering an incentive on the purchase price of these assets to make sure that we get, in exchange for that, we get the data so that we have better visibility to how the district is performing overall?
Tim, I'm not clear on your question. Data going forward
Yes, data going forward. How many visits, what time of day, average, cost per visit, et cetera.
Getting that from Casella.
Getting that from Casella?
Well, getting it from asking the town.
Town won't have it.
They won't have it. Yeah, no. I'm almost positive that is not part of their contract with Casella. I mean, I haven't seen it, but I don't recall them having that requirement in the RFP. Josh, do you remember that? No, we're not going to have any of that information. We don't get that
Outbound material we'll have information on because they have to
Yes.
report it at the transfer station. Like we'll get that,
Yes.
but as far as trip data in, we won't. That will be Casella's information. We could request it from them, but it's not something they typically share with us.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate.
Other questions or comments about the drop-off, Richmond Drop-Off Center? Hearing none, is there any other business that the board would like to address tonight? Hearing or seeing none, we could entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
So
moved.
moved, Westford.
Seconded, Will.
Thank you. All those in favor of adjourning, please
Aye.
raise your hand or say aye.
Hi.
Bye. Good night, everyone.
And everybody have a
Aye.
happy Thanksgiving, please.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy
Thank you.
Stay healthy.
So long, everybody.
Recording stopped.